Is renting cheaper than buying? There's been a lot of conversations lately about increased interest rates, lack of affordability, the difficulty of folks purchasing their first property. A lot of my clients have just been throwing up their hands and saying, you know what, Joe, it's going to be cheaper to rent than to buy a new property. If you're new here, my name is Joe Massey. I'm with Castle & Cooke Mortgage, and today we're going to dive in and talk about the differences between buying a property or renting a property and what that's going to look like for you over the next 5 years. There was a great article that came out from Redfin just a few weeks ago that it is now more expensive to buy a home in almost all of the major markets in the United States as compared to renting. They studied 50 of the major metropolitan areas, and they found out that buying is only more affordable than renting in 4 cities: Detroit, Philadelphia, Cleveland, and Houston. Nationwide, the typical home costs 25% more to buy than to rent. And they have this cool chart here that shows over here on the right-hand side, there's only 4 areas where buying a home is cheaper than renting, which leads you to believe that it might be better to rent a property right now. And you can see all of these 50 major metropolitan areas, a lot of them over here on the West Coast in California, really expensive to buy a property there, and renting is a lot more reasonable than those markets. But we're here in Denver, so let's talk about our Denver market. And what you see, we're over here on the far left-hand side too, where it's about 60% more expensive to buy than to rent a property. But let's really dive into the specifics of the Denver market. All right, so this is again from Redfin, really a great study that they did here. And what you see is the estimated median cost for a mortgage is this $4,500 a month. The estimated median monthly rent, $2,800 a month, meaning it is 58% more expensive to buy a property than to rent. It costs $1,600 more to purchase your own home right now versus renting a property. All right, that means it's really, really expensive in Denver, and therefore you should just rent for the rest of your life because it's cheaper, right? Well, maybe, maybe not. So let's compare and see what it looks like to rent versus buy in Denver. So from Redfin, we found that median monthly rental cost is $2,843 per month. And I went into the MLS and I found a median priced single family home, which the median price for a home here in Denver is $641,000. I also found a median priced condo, which is $414,000. Now I made a few assumptions on this. Number one, I assumed today's average interest rate of 6.5%. Number two, I assumed the buyer would be putting 5% down. So there's gonna be a little bit of math here, so stick with me, but I think this is all gonna make sense. So if you're buying that property, you're going to be getting a principal and interest payment of $3,687. You're going to be paying homeowners insurance of roughly $150 a month, taxes of roughly $250 a month. If we're not putting down 20%, you are going to have that mortgage insurance of roughly $130 a month for a total monthly payment of roughly $4,218. If you purchase a condo, you're going to have a payment of roughly $2,487. You're going to have lower insurance because you're not insuring as much of a property, roughly $50 a month. Property taxes are a little bit less, around $167. Mortgage insurance is going to be a little less because it's a smaller loan amount. However, you are going to have a homeowners association, roughly $300 a month, for a total monthly cost of $3,095 every single month to own this property. So renting is certainly cheaper than buying a single family home by as much as $1,375 per month. So on the surface, pretty good idea to just continue to rent. But let's not forget what you get if you're buying a single family home. You'll see on the top left a picture of an apartment versus in the middle a picture of a home. So maybe it's worth it for you to spend $1,375 more every month because you want a backyard, more room for the kids, more room for the dog, bigger kitchen, better school district, whatever it might be. Maybe it's worth it to spend that $1,375. Not really sure. Depends on your individual choices. What about the condo and townhome? You see that renting is cheaper than buying a condo or townhome by roughly $252 per month. Now, a condo or townhome is going to be relatively similar to an apartment that you're going to, have shared walls and shared ceilings and floors and whatnot. So not surprising that it's a little bit closer because you're getting kind of a similar type of property. Therefore, you should just rent for the rest of your life because it's cheaper to rent than buy a single family home. It's cheaper to rent than buying a condo or townhome, right? Well, maybe not. Let's look at what happens over the long term. And I consider 5 years to be maybe median or long term. Number one thing you're likely going to have, rents are generally going to go up. So the average rental increase in Denver the last 2 or 3 years has been as much as 10, 15, sometimes even 20%. But over the last 45 years, we've seen that rents have gone up 5% per year on average. So to show you worst case scenario, let's say that rents go up less than the average and go up 4% per year. Well, then year number 2, your payments are going to go up for your rent. Year number 3, your rent payments are going to go up. Year number 4, your monthly rent payments are going to go up. Year number 5, your monthly rent payments are going to go up. So over 5 years, all of these monthly rents are going to add up to $184,000 that you're going to pay in rent. How does that compare to a single family home? Well, number one thing that's going to remain fixed is that principal and interest payment. All right, if you take out a 30-year fixed rate loan, that payment is going to remain the same over this 5-year analysis. Now, there are going to be some increases, though. You're likely going to see increases in insurance and property taxes. So you'll see that as we progress forward, those go up every single year. Now, one thing that's not going to go up, though, is that mortgage insurance. That is going to remain the same, and it will eventually go away once you've accumulated 20% equity into the property. So over 5 years, you're going to pay $255,000 to own this single-family home. How about a condo? Well, your mortgage is going to remain fixed. Doesn't change, right? We took out a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, so your biggest expense remains the same. But you are going to see some increases in homeowners insurance, property taxes, and likely increase in those HOA dues. Overall, over 5 years, you're going to spend roughly $188,000 to purchase a new condo or townhome. Now let's take a closer look and see how these total monthly costs compare. What I've done here is just made this a little bit easier to read. You can still see the total cost of renting, total cost of owning a home, total cost of owning a condo or townhome. So let's look at what happens with the rent over the course of 5 years. You see that this rent goes up quite a bit. All right, you start out at this $2,843, and with those 4% annual rental increases, your payment is going to be as much as $3,325 every single month 5 years from now. Now, how does that compare to owning a home? What you see is when you buy a single-family residence, those payments don't go up as much because you're taking out a 30-year fixed-rate loan. So it remains a lot more flat. Your expenses are a lot more stable because you've got that 30-year fixed rate. Or what if you buy a new condo? Well, your payments stay not the same, but a lot more flat because your biggest expense is that principal and interest. And I put on this same chart this rental property going up as well, ending up at $3,325. So what you see here is in year 1, yes, it does cost a little bit more to buy a condo. It also does cost quite a bit more to buy a single-family home. But in a couple of years, that condo might be cheaper than the rent you could be paying. So let's just kind of file that away for a second, and we'll talk about that more in the future. Now, are there other benefits to owning a property? Number one, yes, there absolutely are other benefits to owning a property. Let's talk about that. Number one, tax savings. Now, I'm not a CPA, so number one most important point, you need to talk to your CPA about this. But you might be able to deduct your interest payments on your federal and state tax returns, and we're going to dive into that here in a minute. You're also going to be paying down the principal. Every month, a portion of your payment goes towards your principal and builds up your equity in the property. And you're likely to get appreciation. Properties in the Denver metro area have averaged 6% appreciation every year over the last 45 years. Now, in some years, it's been as much as 10, 12, 15, 20%. Some years, it's been negative. This year, probably going to be pretty flat. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the future as well. Let's start with talking about the tax benefits and the real monthly cost of owning a home. All right, so if you're renting, you're paying that $2,843, and then that rent goes up, and after 5 years, you've spent $184,000 in rental payments. Now, if you do decide to deduct your interest on your tax returns, and let's assume you're in a 25% tax bracket. Well, every month, you're going to be saving $786. Now, here's where this is a little tricky. You're not going to get a check from the IRS for $786. It's generally going to come back to you in the form of a tax return that you're going to get on April 15th every year. But if you average out that interest savings times that 25% tax bracket, you're going to be saving approximately $786 per month, bringing down your real cost of owning that property and paying that mortgage every month to roughly $3,432 every month. And it's going to go up, as we talked about, with taxes and insurance going up. But over the course of 5 years, after your tax benefits, you're going to be spending about $209,000 to own that single-family home. Now, what about a condo or townhome? Same thing. Let's assume you're in that 25% tax bracket. You're going to get that interest deduction on your tax return. And then at the end of the year, you're hopefully going to get a larger tax return. Average that tax return out over 12 months, you're going to be saving approximately $530 a month, which is going to bring you down to this total real monthly mortgage payment of $2,565. So over the course of 5 years of owning a condo or townhome, you're going to be spending about $157,000 in total payments. So how does that compare? This is the same slide we had before, but what you're seeing now is these numbers are a lot closer together because of the tax benefits. As a matter of fact, renting is still cheaper than buying a single-family home by $580 per month in real monthly cost. But buying a condo or townhome, renting is more expensive than buying a condo or townhome once you factor in your potential tax savings. All right, so it's really important to understand, on the surface, dollars going out every month, yeah, it looks like renting is a better option. Once you factor in some of the tax savings, could be a better deal than you really think. Now let's talk about principal reduction and appreciation. Buying property is going to allow you to gain equity and build wealth. So let's talk a little bit about what this looks like. If you're not familiar, amortization is the concept that every month a portion of your payment goes towards principal and a portion goes towards interest. So over 30 years, you start with this mortgage balance here, and it's going to work its way all the way down to zero. Now, what happens with property appreciation? Well, you're starting with this price range here when you purchase the property, and over 30 years, that's going to increase as values go up at that estimated 6% over the 30-year period that you own the property. Now, what happens when we combine these two? You're going to see that over 30 years, your property appreciates and becomes really, really valuable. You also pay off that loan, and eventually that property is paid off. The difference between the property value and the amount of the loan is your equity. And you can see that that grows and becomes very significant over a long period of time. But what we're talking about today is this first 5 years. So let's zoom in and see what happens on this first 5 years of owning this property. If we're renting, how much appreciation and principal reduction do we get? $0.0. There is no appreciation as we're renting a property. So what does that equity growth look like? Zero. There is no equity growth if we rent a property. So you can see we don't even earn $1 of equity. Who's earning that equity? Our landlord. All right. Is this a good idea? Maybe. If renting is the right thing for you, maybe, but you're not gaining any equity. So I'm not sure that that's the best thing for long-term wealth creation. What happens if you buy a single-family home? Well, you're going to get principal reduction. All right, so I calculated this out on an amortization schedule, and on a monthly basis in year one, you're going to average paying down that loan by $543. I also calculated appreciation, and I wanted to be conservative. So I said, what happens if properties only appreciate at 5%? Knowing that over the last 45 years in Denver, properties have appreciated on average 6%. I wanted to be a little bit more conservative and show a conservative picture of what might happen over the next 5 years. So every year, that property is hopefully going to appreciate, and on average, you're going to gain $2,500 a month in appreciation in that first year. Add these two together, and your benefit of owning this property is roughly $3,100 per month, which increases over the first 5 years. So your total benefit and equity growth is $206,000 over that first 5 years. What if you buy a condo? You're still going to get principal reduction. You're still going to get appreciation. It's a little bit less, right? Because it's a smaller loan, so you're not paying down as much, and it's a smaller property, so it's not appreciating as much, but you're still on a monthly basis getting as much as $2,000 in monthly benefit that's going to grow over the time period that you own that property. And in 5 years, you could have as much as $139,000 in equity growth. So how does this look when we put this on a chart? Your single-family residence grows, and you have total equity in 5 years by as much as $237,000. Now, it's an important point. You start with a little bit of equity. Remember, we had 5% down. So you started with 5% down. You had growth of $206,000. So at the end of 5 years, that total equity, assuming 5% appreciation, is $237,000. Now, if you buy a condo, you're also starting with a small down payment, 5% down. You're going to grow your equity by $139,000. And at the end of 5 years, as much as $160,000 in equity. So let's ask the question now. Is it cheaper to rent than to buy? Well, where are you going to be in 5 years? If you rent, you will have paid $184,000 in rent and built exactly $0 in equity. If you buy a single-family home, you will have paid $209,000. More expensive, all right, more money out of pocket, but you will have built $237,000 in equity. But don't forget, that does cost you $580 per month as compared to renting. So it's important to remember, for your monthly budget, this is more expensive. But what you're getting is a single-family home versus an apartment. All right. So don't forget, you're getting probably a nicer, bigger, more spacious property versus an apartment. What if you buy a condo or townhome? After 5 years, you will have paid $157,000 in mortgage payments, but you will have built $160,000 in equity. And let's not forget, you are saving $278 per month as compared to renting. So, should you buy or should you rent? You know what? That answer is 100% up to you. I think you should review all of your options and you should make an informed choice. I personally think the numbers we went through, it is a really, really good opportunity to buy a property right now. Particularly if you buy a condo or townhome, you're likely saving money as compared to renting. If you buy a single family home, yes, maybe it is more expensive on a monthly basis, but you're going to build a heck of a lot of equity and hopefully have a really, really good property at the end of 5 years. Want to learn more? Give me a call. 303-809-7769. Of course, check out my website, loansbyjmassey.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok. Always happy to chat about this stuff. Put a comment down below. I would love to know your thoughts. Is it better to buy or is it better to rent? We'll see you guys again soon.